Start. This is the Limitless Leadership Lounge, and man, I'm so excited for our conversation today. We haven't had many two-time guests, but the ones that we have for a reason, and I'm really, really excited to dive in. Coach, you know Peter best, so go ahead and introduce our guest.
Yeah, so Peter and I admire each other, I guess, from overseas. But Peter and I connected many years ago when he interviewed me, and it's just a joy that we've had him now for our second time on our podcast. I'm just going to give you just a real brief because Peter has just so many accolades. I will say off my script that I know Peter got into business, actually had his trials and tribulations, but ended up doing quite well and sold his business for a pretty good lump sum, and then has been in the personal growth field for many decades. And I'll share just a little bit. He says, if you're a consultant, entrepreneur, or fellow professional and want to be rightfully rewarded for the value you deliver and cascading impact you make in our world, then discover these breakthrough approaches to transform your knowledge, experience, and expertise in substantial ongoing streams of income, not just with the short-term results, but through proven strategies to attract your ideal clients, those who stay, pay, and say, and build yourself a business and a life of your choice. Over the 30 plus years, Peter Thomson has helped thousands of professionals like you to achieve the success, freedom, and recognition they deserve. And he also, his latest book, which we're going to delve into in just a moment, is called Persuasion, which all leaders, I think, need the ability to persuade. So without any further ado, my friend Peter Thomson, welcome back to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Well, thank you both. I'm delighted to be with you, but I don't know who this guy is who's coming along, but I certainly would like to listen to him based on what you just said.
That's you, Peter.
Peter joins us over in the UK, so it's always good to have an overseas guest. So, Peter, let's delve right into it. You've written a number of books and all kinds of programs over the years. Tell us, first of all, why the book Persuasion, and for the reader, because I know as a leader we need to be able to persuade people. So, give us some advice on that.
Absolutely. So yes, indeed. In fact, if you can see beside me, those people who might be on the video version of this, actually, all these books behind me and all these programs, these are all mine. In fact, they're not all of mine because they wouldn't all fit there. But yes, I have been, I think we might say, prolific over the last 30 years because I absolutely love sharing my knowledge, my experience, my expertise, and what I think is what I would call the magic ingredient, which is my take on it. Because I think all of us in this business, when I say all of us, looking at you two and anybody who might be listening to us individually, is we have great stuff to share. But sometimes what people don't always share is that magic bit, which is their take. And I think that's where the money is. There's a lot of other people who've got knowledge, experience, expertise, but they don't have us. So it's that little special bit that we bring to the party. So I heard a guy who worked for a major insurance company in the UK, to answer your question, Jim, many years ago, and he came out with this expression. And I think he's right. Some people have questioned it, but I do think it is based on truth. And he said this: all communication is an attempt to persuade someone else to do or avoid doing something, either now or in the future. Let me say it again, because it's nice and clear. So all communication, and there's my emphasis on the word all communication is an attempt to persuade someone else to do or avoid doing something, either now or in the future. Now, when I say all, I would include ourselves, because that self-talk is often us persuading ourselves to do or avoid doing something now or in the future. Shall I have that extra chocolate? Let me think about it. I wonder what the consequences of that are going to be. So I think that's what persuasion is. And so if that is true, and I fervently believe that it is, then every time, particularly when we're in business, every communication we're having with somebody, a member of our team, ourselves, a supplier, a client, a prospect, anybody, somebody on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever we're communicating, however we're communicating, whatever medium we're using, it's all persuasion. It's all persuasion. And therefore, I believe that everybody, in fact, I think it should be taught at school really, everybody has to learn to persuade, however, with this caveat. This is my way of thinking about it. I think this is a different way. I think this is a way that makes it very relaxing, very easy to be in business and to persuade. We need to, I believe, learn how to sell. One. Number two, stop selling. Sounds strange. Number three, and allow people to buy. Because I think when we take that positioning, we need to know the process. Of course we do. We need to know. I mean, I'll tell you now, because I'll dive a bit into the Persuasion book as well. Here's a 6-stage process I developed 35 years ago. Open, gather, present, adjust, conclude, and follow. So I'll say it again slowly. You can ask me about each one if you want to. Open. We need a really good opening, right? Then the second part is we gather. We don't present. Most people go open, present. They open and they say, let me tell you about me and what I can do for you. Right? No, no, no. When I interviewed Tony Alexander, a brilliant guy, talks about charisma, very clever man in the States many years ago, probably about the time I interviewed you, Jim, right? So I was obviously on a roll then. He said this to me, which I thought was fantastic. He said, let me close that out of the way. He said, prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. And I went, wow, say that again, right? Prescription before diagnosis is malpractice. And yet most people do that. They go open, present. No, that's prescription before diagnosis. It's open, gather, present, adjust, conclude, and follow. And for me, if I was having an hour's conversation with somebody, I would probably be spending 45 minutes gathering. Because here's another, I got loads of expression. You two know me well enough, right? Okay. Here's another. Grab this one. I think this is genius, even though I wrote it. Forgive me, whoever. Right. The selling takes place in the gathering stage as people sell themselves in their answers to your well-crafted questions. Yeah. Once more for clarity, Peter. Okay, we'll do. Right. The selling takes place in the gathering stage, not the presenting stage. The selling takes place in the gathering stage as people sell themselves in their answers to your well-crafted questions. So how I spend my life is well-crafting questions. I spend a lot of time thinking about the power of the questions I'm asking people and what will be the impact, what will be their mode of thinking when I answer it, because they're all questions are answered, not always verbalized, but they are answered, even if it's inside. So when we ask questions, we are in control. When we're making statements, we've relinquished control. So I think the deal is, and forgive me, you've lit the fuse with your question, so I'm going, right? So I think the thing is that when we're in that questioning mode, that's when we are in control of the conversation, because we ask a question, somebody answers. We then take control back by asking another question. And the way in which we craft those questions, open, close, presuppositions, and a whole of other stuff we can talk about, we are totally in control. And I think that is essential, because persuasion is the #1 skill to have in every area of your life. And there are a number of key parts of persuasion, which I will happily share with you if you want me to. So,
yeah, let's go. Before Jon delves in, I got to ask you two things. I certainly want to delve deeper into persuasion, and if you can repeat those 6 steps. But I also immediately, can you, because I kid leaders now, I call it, you should be a CQA, a chief question asker.
Yep.
Let's delve a little bit deeper though. Give us a couple examples of questions that you think are very helpful in the gathering process.
Certainly. Okay. I learned this one. I always like to, like yourselves, I like to credit where stuff comes from. I remember Bob Proctor, who I met a few times actually, and he asked me to fly to Canada and speak at one of his events. A lovely guy, and sadly no longer with us. And Bob said that he could brag about all of his content because it wasn't his. And I thought, oh, so what a wonderful idea. Right. So I'm a lifelong learner like we are, and I'm sure anybody listening to this or watching this is also a lifelong learner, or they wouldn't be here. And I learned this off a guy, I love his books and his content. His name's Nick Kolender, and the Nick ends with a K and the Kolender begins with a K. Nick Kolender. And this was one of the ones which I'm putting it up very high. You've asked me about mine, but this was a great one I learned. This is a very specific context, but boy, does it work. Let's imagine we've done some marketing and we've arranged, or one of our colleagues has arranged for an appointment with us. So we've got this potential client who's going to speak to us. Let's call him Fred for the sake of a name. Okay, so Fred is going to turn up on an appointment. Now, for me, I would want an opening, I'd want gathering, I'd want an agenda and all the rest of it. But I want to ask this question quite early in the conversation. It's this. I'll start with an embedded command, which is tell me. Now, I don't say tell me. There's no, it's an embedded command, but it's said gently. So tell me, and I would personalize it because then Fred would know it's for him. I'd say, tell me, Fred, just very gently in that way. Tell me, Fred, what made you interested in me helping you to open brackets context, whatever the context happened to be. So I'll give you an example. So tell me, Fred, what made you interested in me helping you to raise your fees and make more money? Tell me, Fred, what made you interested in me helping you to finally write your business book? Yeah. Tell me, Fred, what made you interested in me helping you to create a marketing machine that brings a stream of qualified leads to you at the rate that you want, almost like a tap you can turn on and off? What was that? Right. Now, all we do then is listen to what Fred says after he says the words, I want, or words that indicate that concept, I want. Yeah, I'll give you an example. So I'm talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago. I said that to him. So tell me, it wasn't Fred, but tell me, Fred, what made you interested in me helping you to increase your business? And he said, well, Peter, I've been watching you on LinkedIn for a number of years. I've had some stuff and, these things that people say about you are good. And basically what I was allowing Fred to do was to sell himself in his answers to my well-crafted question. Or I could say Nick's well-crafted question, right? in that particular context. So you see the power of that particular question. The way that I ask questions, and this is another little nuance, is I've found when you ask somebody how much they turn over, let's say I'm talking to a consultant, successful consultant, and ask them how much they turn over. Some don't always tell you exactly the truth. Right? They gild the lily a touch, right? But I found a way to get the accuracy of it, and it's this. I will talk to somebody about, as an example, Jim, let's say I was talking to you, and I'd say, and we're going to work together. I say, Jim, let's imagine we've been working together for, say, 12 months, right? And we've been loving it. We've had a lot of fun together with a serious intent, and turnover has increased. Tell me, how much would you like to be turning over in direct fees in that 12th month? And if you don't answer, this is the nuance here. If you don't answer quickly, I will give you some numbers to play with. So I will say, is it 20,000 a month? Is it 5,000 a month? Is it 10,000 a month? And I will always do it in that order: high, low, medium. If you look at the cards you get from charities in the post or letters, and they ask you to make a contribution, usually they'll go high, low, medium, right? Because they're using what's called the contrast principle, right? So if you don't give me that answer, right, then I'll give you some answers to play with. So let's say that you said, oh, well, actually, you said, actually, the higher one, I wanted to be 20,000 a month, all right? And then I'll answer this question. And how does that compare to today? And when I do it like that, I'm certain that I invariably get the real answer. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So again, it's always thinking through what mode are you going to put somebody in, what thinking brain, what mindset are they going to be in? Let me just throw this into the equation here. When you make a statement followed by a question, if somebody answers the question, they don't question the statement. Right? When you make a statement followed by a question, if somebody answers the question, and they will answer it, they may not verbalize it, they will answer it, then they don't question the statement. And the way in which I would use that is, if I'm having a face-to-face meeting with somebody, I'd use what's called my action agenda, which I developed many, many, many years ago. And there's a script that goes with it. It's only 18 words, and it's this. So, John, if I was dealing with you, I would say, John, I've been thinking about our meeting. That's a statement. And I've prepared an agenda. It's another statement. And I would pass you the agenda and I'd say, is there anything you'd like to add?
Mm.
Right. Now, when you consider the answer, firstly, you accept the two statements. You don't say, have you been thinking about it? Have you really prepared it? I don't think you have prepared it. You wouldn't dream of doing that. You accept it. I call it the spoonful of sugar. Right? So I've been thinking about our meeting. Inside you're going, oh, that's a bit different. So somebody who didn't just turn up then, they actually been thinking about the meeting and I've prepared an agenda. Wow, that's professional. They've prepared an agenda. And then in order to get you to get involved in the conversation, I say, is there anything you'd like to add? And what must you do, John, to answer the question?
Accept the first two statements.
Correct. And there's something else you must do. Is I give you this piece of paper and I say, is there anything you'd like to add?
You have to answer.
You got to read it. Yeah. So to be able to answer it, you got to read it. Right. So you're going to look down at it, and guess what? I've spent years getting that bit right, the bit that you're looking at. So Jim, to answer your question of earlier, the sort of questions that do that, let me tell you what the first item on the agenda is. It's just one word, background. Now, when somebody looks at the word background on the agenda, in their mind, they say, I know what that means. So when I've asked audiences across the world, well, what do you think the word background means? And people say, well, it's my background. I say, great, okay, anybody else? Oh, well, it's the client's background. Oh, great, okay. Oh, no, it's the background to the conversation between us. Oh, no, it's the background to the economy. No, it's the background to the problem they've got. And the list goes on and on and on. And that's the beauty. Because it doesn't matter what it means. Because what it is, I'm looking for that first person on the background to go, that's okay. And then because they've said, yes, that's okay, you get a halo effect into the following items. Because the first thing in any conversation impacts what subsequently happens. That's how the contrast principle works. Right? So all of that happens. But the question I've asked, and Jim, you were asking about different types of well-crafted questions. I asked this question, surprisingly, looking for a no answer. Is there anything you'd like to add? I'm looking for the person to say no, not to say yes. Well, most people get the crafty questions to get a yes because they're pushing for yes. Mm-hmm. And the reason they're pushing for yes is they've read How to Win Friends and Influence People, and point 14 on that list, and there's 30 points in that book. I read it every day, that list. It's part of my programming. Right, point 14 is start with 2 yeses in every conversation. Mm-hmm. Which is a good idea, isn't it?
Yes, momentum.
In your mind, you just said yes because I put a yes tag on the end of it because I said, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Didn't I? And there's another one. Right? Yep. But sometimes you may not have noticed that I've been using all the time, have you? And that's a no tag because you almost automatically said no. So you see, it's this crafting of things in a way to think carefully, what do I want someone to be thinking, feeling, and doing in response to what I say? And so when I say well-crafted questions, that's what I really mean by this. I mean, it is taking the time to plan it out and think what would happen. Yeah, I love to let people say no rather than say yes, because a lot of people try and force people to say yes. I remember somebody once phoning me, sort of cold sales call, and they said, would you like to save money on your telephone bill? And I said, not really. And they said, why? I said, well, I hold shares in British Telecom. I don't want people reducing the telephone bills. I want them to go up. Right? So, I was just playing, but they didn't know what to do with me. I just hung up. I mean, it's like, who's this lunatic I'm dealing with? So,
that's great.
My wife, Sharon, who's very clever, says that when somebody speaks to her, particularly a salesperson, she opens the door wide. And every time they get something slightly wrong, the door's closing. But she's prepared to be open about it. But there's going to come a point where if you're that bad, slap, that door's closed, goodbye, it's no good. Let me give you another example of a well-crafted one, and we can move on to something else. I'm a great believer. This is the Persuasion book that we were talking about. And I use books a lot and reports as free gifts, as marketing magnets, if you like. And with books, I love to send them in the post, right? Because, and I'll ask you to this question, if I may, have you ever thrown a physical book in the bin? No, most people haven't, right? You get occasional person who will. I think I've one in my life, once. So if you throw a book, if you send a book to somebody in the post, then it's like you're giving them something of real value, which you are. Yeah. You give them the business card, they file it away, but the book,
Yeah.
it stays there. It's with them. It's for
Yeah.
life, And you get, it's like a big business card. You get your picture on the back. You get to say about you without having to say it yourself. You get to say what you do, and all of this stuff going on. You get the benefits here, and etc. So it's just the most magical thing that you could ever send out to people, isn't it? So part of our follow-up process with that, which we use, is I wouldn't do it, and I wouldn't suggest the author ever phones, is for someone to phone to make an appointment. So they'll phone up Fred. And I ask people in audiences, I've said, imagine you've sent a free book to somebody and then someone's going to phone up and speak to them. What do you think is the first question they're going to ask them? Are they going to say, did you get it? And the person's going to go, yes, fantastic. What's the second question? What do you think? I'm playing here. Well, what do you think is likely to be? Most people would ask that person. What's the next thing?
Have you started reading it yet?
Correct. That's what a lot of people say. And another one, another idea, Jim, anything else somebody might say?
Um, what have you thought if you started reading about it?
That's it. What's the best idea you got from it? What was the now? Let's look at the reality. We send somebody a book. Are they likely to have read it? No. However interested they are in the topic, unless it's from an author they've been following for years, etc., they may have. So if we're doing our well-crafted questions and we're going, what's the likely situation here? Is it likely they've read it? Don't think so. What I think the odds are, maybe 1 in 10 has read it. So why would I ask them a question that's centered on reading it? So I've got to ask a different question. So this comes back to well-crafted question. So here's the question we use. We would say, so you asked for the book, Fred, didn't you? I wouldn't say, my PA, Rachel, or one who would phone. So you asked for the book from Peter, didn't you? That's a yes. Right? Has it arrived okay? Yes. And here's the question. I don't suppose you've had a chance to read it yet, have you? And what happens if the person has read it? They'll go, well, actually, yes, I've read it. You said, great. Well, the reason Peter wanted you to have it was so he could chat to you about the content and on to an appointment. But what if the person hasn't read it? So I don't suppose you've had a chance to read it yet, have you? I know I've been busy. Yeah, we're busy, aren't we? Well, the reason Peter wanted you to see the next bit doesn't change. Couldn't make any difference because you're not sending someone a book for them to read it. You're sending them a book for them to stick their hand up and say, I'd like that book, please. In other words, to self-qualify at the top of your marketing and sales funnel. And by the way, it is marketing and sales, not sales and marketing. People go to sales. It's the other way around. It's marketing and sales. So that's another example of a well-crafted question that we've been using for 25 years. Yeah. Right? I don't suppose you've had a chance to read it yet. I mean, people who know me well, if I started that, I don't suppose you've had a chance. They go, no, I haven't read it yet.
They're like you with the phone bill, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's it, John. Yes. So,
you talked to. Go right ahead, Peter.
Is this making some sense?
Yeah, yes. Absolutely. I'm loving these tangible questions that you're giving us. I'm writing many of them down. I might kind of borrow them, put my own spin on them. But my question for you, too, is you mentioned right near the beginning about sales. And one of the first things that you said you need to do is to learn how to sell and then to stop selling. So what is learning how to sell without selling?
Right. Okay. So it's understanding the process of communication on the basis of that thing we start with. All communication is an attempt to persuade someone to do or avoid doing something now or in the future. Right. So how are we going to communicate persuasively with integrity, but with this caveat? Let's not go around the world trying to convince people. Let's go around being convincing. And that little subtle shift makes all the difference. Because suddenly all the heat goes out the conversation. I don't try and convince people. I do my best to be convincing. I'm passionate about things. I think I'm fairly persuasive and powerful about it, but I'm not trying to convince somebody. If somebody wants to work with me, fantastic. Let's see if we can find a way. But You know, don't misunderstand this, because this can come out as a bit strong, but I'll say it anyway, because the truth of it, it's not going to change my life one iota whether they do or don't work with me. And when we have that belief, because that's a belief pattern, that's not a financial statement, that's a belief pattern, right? Then we come at it. This is where it is. We live in a little village just north of Arrogant. No, sorry, just south of Arrogant.
There we go.
Right? So we live in a little village just south of Arrogant, north of Confident, right? So we're confident about it. We have what I think is the three things of success in the right place. And I call it ABC. And they're these: confidence. We have the confidence to communicate what it is we want to talk about. The B is we have belief. So we have belief in the efficacy of our products and services. They do what we say they will do, right? And we have A, and I ask most people, what do you think A is? People say, oh, it's attitude or it's action or whatever. I say, no, no, no. This is the number one. It's alignment. It's us being who we are. So we're totally aligned with our identity. And that links to another expression linking to persuasion, which is this: people will never consistently do who they aren't.
Mm.
Well, sounds weird, but it's true, isn't it? Who somebody is their identity, it's their beliefs, it's their values. We could look at the Dilts pyramid and go through the whole of that, but it's basically their identity. This is why most training doesn't work, because the person doing the training does not align the skills with the identity of the person being trained. And therefore, they might use it for a little while, then they'll revert to who they are. Because the other side of the equation is true. People will consistently do who they are. So if we're going to teach somebody how to do something, we've got to give them the identity statements and questions to go with it, so it becomes who they are, because that's why it becomes aligned. So in order, ABC is alignment, belief, and confidence. And when those are running, then it works. Then that works. So go back to the how do your answer your question there, John, getting to the point of it is, we've got to get that alignment right. So we've got to have our belief. We're not trying to convince people. So we've got that part going, right? So we're going to be convincing, but we're not going to try and convince people. So now we've got to have a process in order to be able to communicate what it is we want to talk to somebody about persuasively. How do we do that? We have a platform in a commercial conversation of an agenda, because that makes sense to do a roadmap, if you will, a route map for the conversation. And then we've got to go through the basics of normal communication. So we've got to have an opening. So what do we say to people at the start? Because the opening is critical. We've all heard, haven't we? I'm going to say we all, because we know the three of us here and other people now, is you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And it's so true. I mean, it's trite, it's hackneyed, it's old, but it's true. You never get a second. So the opening is critical. The famous Ted Nicholas, who I got to spend a lot of time with, a lovely, lovely man, unfortunately also known with, said this to me, and he said it in his works over all the years. And probably the best copywriter the world has ever known, in my opinion, Ted Nicholas. 75% of the buying decision is made at the headline. So in written communication. But it's not 75% of the level of interest. It's 75% of the buying decision. So at that moment, the person goes, yeah, probably going to buy this. And then it's up to us to get it wrong afterwards. This is why I say that the gathering stage comes before presenting. Presenting is confirmation. The selling takes place in the gathering stage, right? Because you're gathering because you're asking people a question, and you're commenting on the question and saying, well, we can do this bit to do that bit, and they're nodding along, and it's all happened in there. And then you do your 5-minute presenting. That's basically ticking the boxes to say, okay, we're doing it. I mean, but it's all about gathering. So we've got to have a really good opening. So what do we want to say at the opening? Cool, the weather out there, terrible. The traffic was so busy. Right? Yeah, and how you feel? Oh, yeah, it's terrible. I mean, it's pathetic, isn't it? I mean, I'm strong about this, so you have to forgive me. I know when I used to do sales training for corporates when I first sold my business, and I would say just for fun to the sales directors I was dealing with, I think we should give the course a name, don't you? And they said, oh, that's a good idea, Peter. And I said, well, what do you think we should call it? And they obviously, they perhaps wouldn't have an idea. Why should they have an idea? And I'd say, look, I've got an idea. Why don't we call it forward to basics? And they would say, don't you mean back to basics? They go, no, they're nowhere near there yet. They're nowhere near, right? We can't go back somewhere they've not been before. We've got to get them there first. Let's call it forward to basics. Let's get all the basic stuff in play. That's what I'm talking about here, John, with this process is we've got to get the basics right. So what's that opening? What do we say in the opening that engages the person to the level they're going, I might buy this, whether it was a product or service or whatever it was. So I'll give you an example of what I think is a powerful opening. So let's say, John, let's say me and you we're meeting, or you and I meeting for a conversation about helping you build your business, right? And so I say, okay, John, so as I understand it, the purpose of our meeting is to do three key things. Number one, for me to understand where you are now, what's going on, what's going well, where there might be any challenges. Excuse me. Number two, where you're trying to get to in the future. If you can tell me, clarity, so I can see where we're going. And number three, how by working together, we can get you there more smoothly, more easily, and almost certainly more profitably than we may have considered before. Have I got that about right?
Yes.
How could you say no? How could you possibly say no to that?
I mean, especially if you've already built trust, right?
Exactly. Well, I'll have already asked you. So tell me, John, what made you interested in me helping you to grow your business?
Maybe it was your content. Maybe it was word of mouth. Maybe it was one of your books.
Excellent. So then I will follow up. So, John, as I understand it, the purpose of our meeting is for us to go for three things. Number one, for you to tell me where you are now and move on. Number two, where you're trying to get to. And here's the change in the next bit with the exact words. And how, and I just added it in as almost like a side note, and how by working together. And then I changed the pronoun. We can get you there more smoothly, more easily, and almost certainly more profitably than we may have considered before. Statement, 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 statement. So now what must follow is a question. John, have I got that about right? Not have I got that right? Not that's right, isn't it? None of that stuff going on, right? John, have I got that about right? And you will say yes. I'll say, fantastic. So tell me, remember, because background's the first item on the agenda. So tell me, John, how did you get involved in this business? Why did you make the decision to start this business? And when I ask you that why question, that's another carefully phrased question. Why that question? If you answer by telling me the reasons you started the business, I know in this context, you are options based in your language. If you tell me the story of how it happened, in effect, a series of snapshots, right, then I know you're procedurally based within this context at this moment. Right? So I've asked that question on purpose to learn your language patterns with regard to this, so that when I come to propose my potential solution, which I'll be doing within the gathering stage, having asked you questions, I'll be talking about, well, we're going to go a step-by-step process. I've got a system for this, John, which I think you can plug into, and so you'll know precisely what to do and when to do it. Does that feel right for you? And if you've given me a what answer to a why question, I'm pretty sure I've probably got that to resonate fairly strongly.
Yeah. So that's the two yeses right there, at least. And now you're gaining that background information, and then you go from there. So that's really selling without selling. Is that also the concept of assumptive closing techniques too?
It is, but I think there's a stage past assumptive. So thank you for bringing that up. No, in fact, I don't think I've ever been asked it in that way. So thank you, because I would love to share this idea with you. I'm a great believer in assumptive selling. We've got to be very careful. I actually prefer words like might, maybe, perhaps, because here's my expression on it, John, which is this: if you're too certain too soon, you push people away. So I think we have to be careful. Doesn't mean we can't be powerful, but we've got to live in that village just south of arrogance, not north of it, but still confident, but calmly confident. I once saw a professional golfer who was a long distance ball hitting champion, and he was being interviewed, and the interviewer said to him, so as a mark out of 10, how tightly do you hold the golf club? I used to play golf, but I don't these days. Right? How tightly do you hold the golf club? And he said 3 out of 10. And the interviewer said, 3 out of 10, don't you drop it? He said, no, no, no. If I'm 10 out of 10, I'm so tense I can't even swing. If I'm 1 out of 10, it's going to fly out my hands. But 3 out of 10, I'm like that. I'm not like that. I'm not like that. I'm there. And it's that level of intensity, calm, very focused, very certain, but being prepared to be completely relaxed about it, not too certain too soon, might, maybe, perhaps. Right. So it's think of it in that way. So we've got the opening. Then we've done that opening. You've said yes. I've asked the why question. You've told me why or what. I'm understanding. I'm listening to all what's going on. So we're into the top of the agenda with the background. So I'm already into the gathering stage. Right. So then I'm going to follow up on the promise of the opening by saying to you, so Jon, what's going on in the business at the moment? And I'm going to lean forward. I'm going to open my eyes. I'm going to be fascinated because I am fascinated to know. Right. Great. Okay. So tell me, where are we trying to get to? Did you hear that? Not where are you trying to get to? Where are we trying to get to? It's naturally us language because it's me and you working together. We're on the same side of the desk against the common enemy of problem, challenge, lack of money, lack of leads, lack of whatever it might be. Because that's the positioning, isn't it? We don't want to be sitting opposite each other. We want to be sitting on the same side of the desk. Yeah. When I used to do physical meetings, far more physical meetings, I would invariably put something on the desk to show somebody, right? And so I would perhaps have some testimonials, right? And I would say to somebody, well, you might want to see what other people have said about this, whether it works or not. And I'd put it on the desk right in the middle. And then I'd just relax and I'd see what they do with it. And if they left it there, I know I've got some more work to do. If they pick it up and take it into their territory, I'm at that seat like a jackrabbit, or not that fast, right? I'm up and round, and then I'll have to stand up and see if I can do this a bit. I up and stand, and then I'll palm like this. I'd go. The particular point I wanted to talk about was this here. Right? But I'm now on the same side of the desk because they've invited me in by taking my stuff there. If they pushed it away, the other side, I've got a lot of work to do. And if it was read the testimonials, I would then say, this is a strange question. This is a carefully crafted question. I'd say, where's the gents? And they'd go, and they'd say, oh, it's 2 doors down the corridor. I say, okay, I'll be back in a moment. And I would leave the room because I want them to have the time to read the testimonials without me there. Because they'll read them then. If I'm there, they'll be conscious of me waiting to do the next bit. So there we are. So we've got open, we've got gather. So we're gathering. So what we need to do for ourselves is make a list backwards. What do we need to know from the client, potential client, or actually, I think of them as a client because I have another expression, hundreds of these expressions. We treat people as though they have said yes, not as though they will say yes. So that's back to your assumptive bit. But if you ask me that question again, because I went off track, I'll tell you the bit I meant to tell you in a minute, okay? And that technique I just used there was called SALT. Right? And it comes from a brilliant program in America by Stephen K. Scott called Mentored by a Millionaire. This is the guy that did the infomercials with Chuck Norris and Christy Brinkley with fitness equipment. And he said this expression. He said, most people say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. He paused and then said, I can, every time. And he paused again. He said, all I have to do is put enough salt in the oats. Yeah. Genius, absolute genius. And salt, in communication terms, is curiosity. So saying about something you will talk about in a minute is creating curiosity. In copywriting terms, that would be transitional copy or stuff like that. Right? So we're doing that. So we've got open, gather. So I would suggest we work backwards and we say to ourselves, right, what do I need to know about this client, about their problems, about their dreams, hopes, aspirations, future, etc., in order for me to know, number one, can I help them? Right. Number two, do I want to help them? And three, how can I explain to them what I can do in response to my question so it's in the gathering stage and it doesn't become a separate bit where I go, okay, pin back your ears, I'll tell you now what I can do. We don't want to be like that, right? So I've got to craft those questions based on that's what I'm trying to get out of it. So now I know I've got to go ask a question of you, Jon, to get you to tell me that. Well, that's not too difficult to do, right? So you're doing that with real intent because you want to know, because you don't want to deal with everybody. You want to deal with the ideal client, right? And you want to make to that client the ideal offering and the ideal offer, right? Because then everybody's happy, which is just perfect. So open, gather. When that gathering's bit done, we're doing a present out bit if we haven't already said this is what I do and this is how I do it. And now what we've got to do is we've got to talk about the money. Right? We're going to talk about the money. So how do we talk about the money? Well, I believe that what we've got to do is must take control of the financial thinking of the person we're speaking to. Because if we don't know how they feel about money. I'm sure the three of us could go out in either my country or your country and find somebody, if we gave them $10, they'd feel rich. And we'd find somebody, if we gave them $10 million, they wouldn't feel any richer. So we don't know how people feel about money. So what we've got to do is we've got to create, this is more well-crafted questions, contrast between what it is that we have to offer. Here's another expression for you. We sell price based on the contrast between the current emotional and financial cost of the problem compared with the investment in our solution. Makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah. So we're basically creating that contrast between how much is the problem costing you, either now or in the future. So we might say, what did it cost in the past? What's it costing now? And what's it going to cost you in the future? And we're comparing that, if we're solving a problem, with the investment in our solution. I don't mind saying cost in our solution, by the way. Or if we're helping somebody make more money, then we're looking at how much more is the potential, and we've got to be careful with that about how many years and things we're using compared with the investment. So if I'm saying to you, John, in your business, saying, okay, so John, you want me to help you make another $20,000 a month? Fantastic, that's $240,000 a year. Brilliant, I understand that. Tell me, John, how long are you aiming to stay in this business? And you go, oh, I don't know. You know, I'm only 19 now. I mean, did I get that right? No, I got it wrong, didn't I? Okay, sorry.
Not quite.
How many years you aim to say? Oh, I don't know, Peter, at least 20 years. Okay, so you want me to help you make $250,000 a year for 20 years? Okay, that's 5 million. So you want my help to make you 5 million? Oh, fantastic. You know, I've got some great news. And I'm going to pause. If I wait long enough, you'll say, what is it? Right? And you go, what is it? I say, it's not going to cost 5 million for us to do it. Right? So there we go. So we're creating contrast all the way through. So we tend to contrast either with the cost of the problem in the past, which can't be recovered, particularly, or the cost of the problem now, or the cost of the problem in the future, or possibly all three added together. Right? And then we're comparing that to the investment or cost in our solution. Remember, we're not talking finance, we're talking emotion as well. Yeah. And then, so there we go. So that's in the presenting little bit. And here's another expression: without contrast, everything sounds expensive or cheap, and you don't know which it is. So we have to contrast. We have to take control, because if we don't take control, we're gambling on what that person thinks about those numbers. Yeah. I know I've been rabbiting on, because I do. As you know, you lit the fuse and sent me off on the road. Off I went. Can I give you an example of that?
Sure.
Please.
Okay. So I'm dealing with a large insurance company in the UK some years ago, probably, I don't know, 15, possibly even 20 years ago. And I've been to see them, and I've used the action agenda that we talked about earlier. We didn't go all the way through it, but remind me about assumptions and stuff, and I'll finish that bit off. I'll close that loop. All right, so I've gone to see them about the action agenda, and they've loved it. The sales director of this division, there's 300 salespeople, he's absolutely loved it. And he said to me, Peter, that's the best thing I've seen in 20 years in selling the action agenda. With that 3-part opening, which I used. He said, can we talk about you helping our sales team? I said, well, that's why I'm here. So anyway, lots of conversations. And I'm finally having a meeting with the national sales manager. This guy's the sales director. His name's Steve. And so I know some of the answers to these questions, but I say to Steve, so Steve, remind me, how many salespeople you have? He said 300. I said, great. And what do you think they're losing per person per month, for whatever reason, knowledge, attitude, skills, whatever reason, in lost turnover? He pauses. I go, Is it 10,000 a month? Is it 1,000 a month? Is it £2,000 a month in lost turnover? He's gone, oh, it must be at least 2,000. I said, okay, let's make a note, 2,000. Great. And tell me, Steve, how long has it been going on for? Is it 5 years, a year, a couple of years? He said, well, it must be a couple of years. I said, I wonder if you've ever worked out how much it's cost. He said, I don't think so. I said, well, let's do it together. So £2,000 a month, 300 salespeople, that's 600,000. Times 12 months is 7.2 million. Times 2 years is 14.4 million. And he said, oh, I didn't realize it was that much. I said, yeah. I said, tell me, Steve, do you get commission on these sales? I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Did you lose commission on these sales? Right, because I was stabbing him there, wasn't I? Right? Did you lose commission on this? So he smiled at me and said, yes, a lot of money. I said, okay. So going forward, is the team fairly stable? He said, yes. I said, so if we did nothing about it, if we did nothing about it, you'd probably lose another 7 million in the next year. I said, so we're talking a 21 million problem there. He said, you're right. I said, yeah, I've got great news. He said, what's that? I said, it's not going to cost that to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? He did what you're doing now. He laughed. They paid me £250,000 to create a personalized program for that company. And when another insurance company saw that, it was a multimedia program. I refilmed 10 of my main modules with videos and audios and workbooks and stuff. I trained the training team. I trained the managers how to coach it, spoke at the conference, all that stuff. And another big insurance company saw it, said, can we have one, please? And I made a 7-module version for them. I said, it must be 20 years ago, for their 100 salespeople, and they paid 125,000 for it. So this, I'm not being flashy, by the way, you know me well enough, but this contrast stuff works. We have to, without contrast, everything sounds expensive. And that's crazy to gamble in that way. So I'll finish off on that loop. So yes, we're talking assumptively, but we've got to be careful. The way I like to do it is to explain what's going to happen over a timeline for the person I'm speaking to, and then ask them a question that's positioned in the future that they would only be able to answer if all those things had taken place. So if they answer that question, and invariably people do, in their mind, they have visualized, if we're going to use that word, that timeline, and they've said yes by answering the question. So when I ask them in the present, if they want that to happen, they always say yes. But again, that just takes a little bit of time. So it's, how do I put it in this way so that it should be crystal clear? I call it yard. They've said yes, the action's taken place, right? The results have happened, and they're delighted. YARD. So yes, action, result, delighted. So if I use yard, I don't always use it, but if I've used that and I've positioned it in that future, and they say yes, or they give me the answer to the question, which isn't necessarily a yes question, it's a something else, right? Sometimes it's an alternative type of question. Then when I ask, well, should we go ahead? They will say yes. They will always say yes. Well, in my experience of viewing that for 25 years, right? But we could have an hour just on that. I'll shut up now. Go
Peter, I gotta say, we gotta be respectful because I could listen to you all day. But I know we've probably gone beyond our time. I do want to ask one last question, and then if you do have time, and then Jon will ask maybe a final question and just where people can get a hold of you. But I just wanted to just put a final loop because I love your persuasion formula, but you said open, gather, present. Can you just share the other three very quickly and maybe just add a little bit to that?
Certainly, Gladys. Adjust is stage 4.
Okay.
And that's adjusting any misunderstanding. Some people would call that handling objections. I don't like to think of it that way because I think that's a sort of negative view of it. I'm just adjusting. And I find that we'll use the word objection now, but most objections come up because of what we didn't say earlier rather than what we did say at the time.
Yeah.
Because it's what you say before you say what you mean to say that makes the difference. And it's also what you do before you do what you mean to do that makes the difference. So if you add the two together, it's what you say and do before you say and do what you really mean to say and do that really makes the difference. I have rehearsed that so often. Anyway, but it's how you set it up first. Yes. I think Robert Cialdini, and I've interviewed him, said it's how you create the climate in which ethical persuasion takes place. So you've got the adjusting stage, and then you've got the closing or concluding stage. So at some stage, however consultative our selling approach, we've got to say, do you want to do it? However gently that is let me get my diary out and let's see when we can get going. I mean, he wants to be gentle because, again, we don't want to be too certain too soon. You might even try a much softer version of that is, what would you like to do next? Yeah, simple as that, right? And then the sixth stage is the follow, which is making certain we're living up to the promise of both our marketing and our conversation. So open, gather, present, adjust, conclude, and follow.
Wow, good stuff. Great stuff, Peter. Thank you. We really appreciate your time, your insight. Persuasion. We got that book. How can we get our hands on that for more Peter Thomson and more what you've been talking about today?
Indeed. I've asked Rachel, as you know, at the start of our conversation, to give me a link for it. So it's a bit long, so I'm going to send it to you anyway, but I will say it out loud, and I'll give you another link to a free one that people can get as well, some freebies. So this is called thepaidbook.com. So we've got that nice and easy, thepaidbook.com/offers/, here comes the complicated bit, VW8ZF7 lowercase c6. Both of you, I'll send you the link so that you can put it there. Okay. But please, I would urge you to get that. It's £12 plus packaging or something. Oh, $12, sorry. It's $12 plus some packaging. The other thing, though, is people might like to get this free one. It's a recent one I've just been putting out in the marketplace, which is called, and this is part of Persuasion, the 12 hidden body language mistakes costing you credibility, confidence, and connections. Which of these might you be unwittingly making? Right? And so we've put this up on a page, right? So that's that body language one. And that link's ever so simple. It's peterthomson.com. There's no P in my surname, but there is an H. Peter, Peter Thomson, THOMSON.com/Coach Jim.
Beautiful.
Right? You don't get easier than that, do we? peterthomson.com/Coach Jim. But the other one was thepaidbook.com/offers/lowercase v, lowercase w, 8, capital Z, capital F, 7, lowercase c, 6. What a crazy link that was.
We'll have it down in the show notes. How's that? That'll make it easier for people.
Thank goodness I put it in the show notes. Yes, yeah.
Perfect. And again,
sorry, say again.
peterthomson.com/Coach Jim. We'll also have that down in the show notes, but a little easier to remember for your free copy of the 12 body language mistakes you might be making. And that one, yeah, that's the free one. And then Persuasion, which is a lot of what we've been talking about today, at the other link down in the show notes.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Peter. We can't thank you enough for your time and your insight today. We always learn so much from talking to you. And I agree with Coach. I could listen to you all day too, but we know where to find more of you, peterthomson.com. Thank you so much for all your time today.
My absolute pleasure, John and Jim. It's always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you, Peter.